It is a pleasure to be here, and there's no pressure now, Dr. Georgios. Thanks for that introduction. Wow, I have big shoes to fill now. So it is really great to be here and to talk about a non-COVID topic. Thank you also, Dr. Najwa, for that wonderful welcome. And I love the idea of us collaborating together among universities and having different topics and different discussions. I think that's how we all grow together and in that knowledge sharing. And it is indeed a pleasure to do a topic like this, which is close to my primary specialty and non-COVID related. Dr. Georgios and I met last year. It seems like maybe 10 years ago since the pandemic, but nonetheless, I believe there's light at the end of the tunnel and we'll all get there very soon. So I'm going to be talking today about non-exercise activity thermogenesis, a neat approach to weight loss. So that's a mouthful, I know, but we're going to go through it kind of piece by piece during the talk. So what we'll go through first, we'll talk about the unhealthy weight and obesity epidemic in the world. It's something that's not going away, and it affects mortality and morbidity in so many different ways of our patients and the population. We'll go over some definitions. We'll talk about what physical activity is, the difference between that and exercise, and what non-exercise activity thermogenesis is. It's an important distinction to make, particularly for our patients that we treat in the clinic. The role of NEAT in weight loss, it's actually well founded in multiple scientific studies, not just recently in recent years, but also back in the 1950s and 1960s. Right now, Mayo Clinic is one of the academic institutions that's really championing this topic. Dr. James Levine from the Mayo Clinic has his own what we call NEAT lab, and we'll get into that in a little bit. We'll go over some studies. I don't like to do just kind of study after study because it gets boring, but I just want to go over some salient issues with the topic. And we'll talk about some practical stuff like incorporating NEAT into a weight loss plan strategy, and we'll just do some remarks. All right, so just jumping into it, all of you know obesity and overweight is an epidemic. It's responsible for over 300,000 deaths per year. That's US data. Sorry, I don't have all of the UAE data updated here yet. And as you also know, COVID is approaching that in the US, 50,000 deaths. It's second only to smoking for deaths due to lifestyle modification. So in my field, a lot of people say sitting is the next smoking. So people who are inactive, because inactivity not just it's not just related to obesity. Obesity is an independent risk factor for heart disease, cancer, diabetes, etc. But sedentary behavior, even without obesity, if you are a thin person, you are sedentary, that also increases your risk for a lot of things, including cancer, strokes, heart disease. So we have to be mindful of that. We have a body, a wonderful body. We have movements that are that we're capable of. We have to make sure that we exercise those. 64% of adults are obese in the United States. That number seems to have leveled out a bit with certain populations, seems to be slightly on the rise in others, but it's something we're continuing to watch. This has tripled over the last 30 years. So we have data from National Health and Examination Nutrition Survey that we have in the US, which we look at a population over many, many years, and we're seeing this tripling effect. And along with this is tripling of obesity-related comorbidities and diseases like diabetes, like sleep apnea. We see a significant increase in the adolescent and childhood rates also. So it's not just adults. And we see a tripling actually of diabetes in the pediatric population. So it's something that we have to take seriously. It's not just an epidemic, but it's a pandemic. It's a pandemic along with our current pandemic. So an epidemic is focused on one regional area or state or country. A pandemic is multiple areas or states or countries. So we have to remember that. And my opinion is that once we get through the current SARS-CoV-2 pandemic, we're gonna see other conditions linked to lifestyle, like sedentary behavior and the like, that will surface years, maybe even decades from now because of its impact. And we'll learn those over time with academics studying those. I couldn't help this picture. I just liked it. It's so funny. So the obesity rate in the UAE is 28.7%. This is a study done a national survey in 2019. And this actually reduced from 2018, which was nice to see. But again, this cartoon is too far. I just look at the guy's eyes before and after, and he actually in this picture has lost a lot of weight himself too. But outside of, joking around, the reason we do these things, the reason I do these things is not because of aesthetics, although that's a nice benefit of people losing weight and staying healthy, but it's because of this. You know, unhealthy weight is linked to so many diseases, and this is a short list. Cholesterol, diabetes, heart disease, arthritis, sleep apnea. You know, it's also linked to rheumatologic conditions, because remember the adipocyte, which is your fat tissue, it's a very powerfully active endocrine organ. It secretes IL-1, tumor necrosis factor alpha, you know, all these different adipokines. So it communicates with other organ tissues. We see that, for example, people who have asthma and who have obesity have worsened flares. The death rate for people who have flu is triple when you have an unhealthy weight, because again, it compromises the immune system with that chronic inflammatory state. And all of you are probably aware, excuse me, even with COVID, obesity is an independent risk factor for mortality and severity of disease. So it goes beyond even just this list. Cancer, ovarian cancer, uterine cancer, colon cancer, all linked positively to obesity. So we need to think along the lines when we're taking care of this aspect of somebody's life. We're not just making them look better, feel better, but we're actually making them healthier and potentially increasing the quantity of years of their life and quality. All right, so let's go through some definitions. So physical activity basically is defined at its most basic level as any bodily movement produced by skeletal muscle resulting in energy expenditure. So most of you are students, you're closer to this information than I am. So anytime you move your body, anytime you go, you walk, check the mail, go to get a cup of coffee, go exercise, that's physical activity. You're burning calories, you're taking ATP, you're turning it into ADP. It's getting hydrolyzed, myocytes are contracting. Your heart pumping in your body is not physical activity, because that's not skeletal muscle, that's cardiac muscle. Your GI tract pushing and peristalsing and moving food through your GI tract, that's not physical activity, because that's GI smooth muscle. So it has to be skeletal muscle. So think of physical activity as this umbrella term, okay? And then let's break it down. There's two subcategories of physical activity. One is called exercise, and the other is non-exercise activity thermogenesis. Those are the only two. You just have to kind of pocket it in your mind that way. So what's the difference? So exercise is basically physical activity that is planned or structured. It involves repetitive bodily movement aimed to improve physical fitness. So the aspects of physical fitness are cardiorespiratory fitness, muscle strength, and flexibility. So in this case, this is somebody who's going and doing repetitive movements, for example, lifting weights, for the purpose of gaining additional strength. So it's not just the movement, but it's the intention of why the person is doing it, on whether it's defined as exercise or non-exercise activity thermogenesis. So if you think of the person who's lifting weights, the purpose of lifting the weight isn't to move that from here to there, because the weight actually ends up in the same place, right? It's because of that force, that effort, and you're doing it for a purpose of improving your own health and your own physical fitness. Think of the runner who's running on a treadmill and exercising. They're not running to get to another, they end up at the same place. They're doing it to improve cardiovascular fitness. So that's exercise. So what is non-exercise activity? So that non-exercise activity is everything else. Everything else that you use skeletal muscle for, you burn calories. So it's physical activity involving non-volitional exercise. So that's easy, right? Physical activity that's not exercise is non-exercise activity thermogenesis. So what are some examples? So we have got occupational activity. So maybe people who are moving furniture or doing manual labor of some sort. Leisure time activity, maybe you go for a stroll in the park, or you go bowling or something like that, go for a walk on the beach. Or household activity, maybe you're doing dishes or moving things around, cleaning, setting the table. All of these things, these are not exercise, because the purpose of these things is to do something. It's not to make yourself healthier. You had to do those dishes because we all need clean dishes, you had to clean because we needed that to be the case. And I know this sounds semantic, but it's important for the rest of this conversation. So just kind of pocket that in your mind as far as thinking of the difference between physical activity, as in exercise, and non-exercise activity thermogenesis. Non-exercise activity thermogenesis is also called lifestyle activity. You can consider those synonyms for the most part. All right, so this is the energy balance equation. This is how many calories you burn in a day, you, me, all of us. So total daily energy expenditure equals your basal metabolic rate plus the thermogenic effect of food plus physical activity. So your basal metabolic rate accounts for 70% of and this is for your average person, 70% of all your calorie burn. And that's from your heart pumping blood, your body maintaining its core temperature, sweat glands working, all that stuff. That's 70% of your daily calorie burn. 10% of it is from the thermogenic effect of food, how much your body needs to burn to digest food, right? So in order to digest enzymes, secrete them, peristalse, move things along, that's about 10% of your physical, of your energy expenditure during the day. And that's kind of how some people modify the macronutrient combination of their foods to help them with weight loss, because protein requires more energy expenditure than, for example, fat or carbohydrates. So you're actually burning more while you're digesting. And then the last is physical activity. And physical activity is about 20%. Now, of that 20%, for your average person, only a quarter of that is through exercise. 75% of that is through non-exercise activity thermogenesis. It sounds counterintuitive, but it actually makes a lot of sense, and we'll dissect that out a little bit more. But your average person might go to the gym and work out and do something along those lines a few times a week. But the 75% of calorie burn of what you're doing from moving your body in physical activity comes from your non-volitional exercise, from your lifestyle activity, which is why it is such a important place for us to think about as far as intervening to help people with weight loss, because a lot of people don't think of that. In fact, there was one study done in the geriatric population, which you had a group of elderly people put on an exercise regimen, and then they were allowed to kind of go home and do whatever. At the end of the study period, they found that the people who didn't exercise actually burned a lot more calories throughout the day than people who did, because the people who exercised, they came home, they slept more. They lounged around more. They didn't move. They didn't do the non-exercise stuff, maybe going for a stroll in the park or doing some of that. So at the end of the day, their net calorie burn was not as high as the NEAT group. So something to think about. All right, so NEAT and weight loss. So what are examples of this? So if you think of our society, look at how incredible our society and how modern it is. So physical activity has been essentially engineered out of our society. We've got cars to get us where we want to go. We've got remote controls. We don't have to get out of our couch to change a channel anymore. Elevators. We've got drive-throughs. We don't have to get out of our car to get our Big Mac. We just go and get our, at least in the US, drive-throughs. We just sit there and we just stuff our faces all day. But I mean, to some degree, we're a victim of our own success. And I think we've forgotten somehow, and I'm talking about the world societies, that these conveniences, these are things that are luxuries, and it's very nice to have, but it's not something that we should be relying on if you're able to make those movements yourself. So for example, if you're in a building and you need to get to the 3rd floor, it's wonderful that there's an elevator there. So somebody who maybe is with their family can take it, or who is injured or handicapped, or has children, that's good for them. The rest of us should be taking the stairs. That's, unfortunately, it's been programmed the opposite, and I have one of the studies to talk to you about that. Finding a stairwell in modern day hotels can be challenging. I always, I travel a lot for teaching in the US, and we go to different cities, Boston and Phoenix and these places, and we have to stay at these nice hotels, and it's funny finding the stairwell, and I'm usually the only guy in there, is hard half the time. And when you do find it, it's a terrible stairwell. It's like dirty and stuff. Everybody's, we're programmed to use the elevators. We've been programmed to sit down and oftentimes eat whenever the opportunity arises. Just think about that in our life. Like, think about when you go to an airport for a flight, right? You're waiting to sit in a seat on an airplane for 10 hours or whatever. And so what do you do in the process of waiting? You sit more, right? We sit in the terminal, and then while we're sitting, might as well eat. I mean, there's food vendors right there. Might as well have that Cinnabon or that burger. And why do we necessarily, why aren't we up and walking? Why not pace the terminal? Because you're just going to be sitting the entire time. But we have these tendencies and we have these habits that actually work against us from a health standpoint. Because again, the whole idea is about health. It's about me, you, everybody, cardiovascular health, not getting these chronic diseases and the like. There's a tenfold difference in calories burned through NEAT when comparing a sedentary job to an agrarian lifestyle. This is an interesting kind of compilation of studies. So if you compare your average person, let's say a secretary who's at work at a desk job, answering phones, writing and stuff like that, they're burning an average of 250 calories through NEAT activity during the day. if you take your average, maybe assembly line worker in the factory, and he's up and standing and he's moving a little bit here and there, he's doing about 500 calories a day in need, so doubling that. Now, if you take your average farmer who, and not the farming now, which is all automated, but who is out there plowing the fields, chopping wood, pulling grain, working the elevator, all that other stuff, the grain elevator, that person would burn an average of 2,500 calories a day just in NEAT. That's not exercise. That's not volition. He wasn't doing it because he was trying to, be strong. He was doing it because he had to make money and to live. Now, if you or I wanted to burn that many, that's equivalent of a marathon run. We have to run 25 miles to get that. And he did it without exercising. So just think of that as far as the intervention when it comes to helping people with physical, with weight loss and with physical health. This is one of those hotels I was telling you. This is Hyatt Regency. I was lecturing here. It was a 4-star hotel, beautiful. This is the stairwell. It sucks. It's the fire escape, and it was dirty, and I was the only one there. And here's why. So it's almost like you're programmed to not exercise and use your muscles. This is some information from the Neighborhood Quality of Life Study. It's an observational study comparing high walkability versus low walkability neighborhoods in major cities on the east and west coast of the US. So high walkability basically are horizontal and mixed use communities. So mixed use basically means a vertical mixed use community is basically a building where maybe the first floor is like retail, the second floor might be a school, 3rd through 5 might be residence halls. So that's vertical mixed use. Horizontal mixed use basically is the same thing, but it's done horizontally. The one building might be a apartment complex. The one next door might be a school. Another one might be like a factory or workers or something like that, but you're working in that community mindset to where you're walking to get where you need to go. So high walkability basically favored pedestrianism, so walking, getting to your place, versus low walkability, which if you think about your typical suburban landscape. So if you, and I just think about the typical US model, you live in the suburbs, there's a main artery highway with small streets. That's an area that's zoned only for residential. If you want to get to the commercial zone, you got to drive all the way across town. Or if you want to get to the school zone, you got to drive to a different area. But it favors more automation and a lot less walking. So according to this study, high walkable neighborhoods had a significant reduction in so many sedentary behavior as well as reduction in weight. So low walkability had a 60% prevalence of obesity and overweight versus 42% in high walkability. TV watching in low walkability was 345 minutes a week versus 245 minutes a week. This was in the early 2000s. Now it would probably be 245 minutes a day and 345 minutes a day of TV watching, at least with my kids. Driving time was also reduced from 242 to 133. Now, this is not an intervention. This is an observation. These people weren't, the researchers didn't go to this studies these people and say, hey, I want you guys to go and try to work out more. This was just observing. So these are people not told to do anything. It naturally changed their health by being high walkable versus a low walkable. That's the power of the environment. Active community in schools by adolescents, and this was over 3,000 kids in downtown Atlanta. 20% in the high walkable versus 9% in the low walkable. So that means active people are walking to school, being outdoors a lot more. And this is, again, without any intervention, without being asked to. And it's interesting, there have been several studies that link the aesthetics of a recreational facility has a large impact on its use by residents. And I kind of, after moving to Abu Dhabi, I'm pretty new here. I've only been here a couple of years, but it's incredible how beautiful the structures are. I live in West Yas, and they built this amazing walkable neighborhood with a park and a skate park and tennis courts. It's so well maintained. And when I walk to the grocery store, the community center to get, it's always full. There's always people there. There's kids and having fun and families. In the US, my hometown, we've got some parks, they're empty. I mean, they look decent, I suppose, but nobody uses them. And I just look at the amount of, I think, thought that probably went to something like that and just reaping the benefits. And the people who are enjoying are just enjoying it. They don't realize maybe that they're getting a lot healthier from it too. Now, this is a study that myself and my group were involved in. We did earlier in 2008, automation versus lifestyle study. So we surveyed a total of 2,100 people, and we went to like conferences that were fitness conferences, and we also went to like large department stores and places that there was a high traffic of people. And what we were doing was we were just looking to observe who's using the automatic option versus who's using the manual option. So for conferences, we're, who's taking the stairs versus who's taking the escalators. And we corrected the variables only for the escalators and stairs that were connected to each other. It wasn't like the escalators are here, but you couldn't find the stairs. And we also were in these major department store areas, and we're watching who's taking, those automatic doors which open, you don't have to push them or anything, versus the manual ones where you have to, God forbid, use a muscle to open up a door. So what we found is that 97% of people chose to use an elevator or an escalator over the stairs. So only 3% of people use the stairs when it was right there. And these were people who were going to a fitness conference to buy treadmills and buy Stairmasters. They're using the escalator. And then 99% of people chose to use an automatic door over a manual door, which was just 1%. And we kind of expected that because we knew people are programmed to some degree. But what we didn't expect is that subjects were willing to form lines to use the automatic form, even if the manual form was quicker. So if there was a line at the automatic door, people sat there and waited versus they could have just gone in straight in the manual door. It's kind of like the first class of doorway walking or something. It's like, oh my God, I need that first class ticket. I can't do it myself. But it was just funny to see that. Here's an example, and this is embarrassing. This is the Obesity Society Assembly in 2008. So you notice the stairs are right next to the elevator, and these are all doctors, by the way. These are my colleagues. Just using the escalators. We're getting to our conferences talking about weight loss, but I guess do as I say, not as I do, right? All right, clinical studies involving, so this idea of non-exercise activity, it's old, it's not new, it's just been kind of brought back in. In 1953, it was noted, and this was published in The Lancet, that bus drivers in the UK had a 30% increase in heart disease compared to conductors. So the bus drivers are the ones sitting there driving. The conductors are the ones who are walking, they're walking and punching the tickets. We don't see them anymore. But if you think of Harry Potter, right? The guys who are like punching the tickets. Naturally, and everything else controlled being the same, just had a 30% reduction in heart disease. Imagine that. They didn't exercise, they didn't diet, nothing, just coming out of the gate. Similarly, there was a comparison was seen in clerks versus postal delivery carriers. They also found that same observation, 30 to 50% reduction in heart disease. Now, heart disease is the #1 cause of death, like worldwide. And here I'm telling you, 30 to 50% reduction by doing nothing different. You don't have to take a drug. You don't have to get a surgery. You don't have to buy special things. Man, if it were a drug, everybody would be on this. But I'm telling you, look, you can have this for free. But this study, so if you remember, the postal workers back then were the guys who delivered it. They pushed carts. It wasn't like the driving, right? The people like in the US, we drive. But these are the ones who were pushing carts versus the ones who were just standing there like stamping your envelope. But this is real. It's almost like too good to be true, but it's true. And there's so much data that is in alignment with this. We all know in the field of looking at data, you can always cherry pick here and there and get any story that you want. Certain government administrations in the US, one in particular, tends to do that. But when you actually look at the composite of science, you have to stack the evidence and you have to understand it, and then observational studies, randomized trials, etc. Then you get to a point where you can actually confirm hypotheses. I'll tell you, that's there for NEAT. So I couldn't resist this one. This was I was visiting my brother in Kensington in the UK, and they had one of those postal delivery carts that you push around. And yeah, I just love that picture. Not that I do that work, but I like the picture. All right, so clinical studies involving NEAT. So non-exercise activity thermogenesis are, again, calories burned through physical activity not involving volitional exercise. So running errands, going shopping, yard work, etc. So this was a study done, published in JAMA in 1999, the multiple risk factor intervention trial. And what they did is they found that leisure time activity was strongly correlated to risk reduction for heart disease. So this was a study of 12,000 men who had high risk for coronary artery disease over 11 years, all right? And people who were on the highest percentile of engaging in lifestyle activity, in NEAT activity, they had a 22% reduction in heart disease and 15% reduction in all-cause mortality. That means dying from anything, dying from the flu, dying from a stroke or an accident even, you know, all that stuff. And that was surprising because I didn't expect to see that, but that was there. This is the Health ABC study. And this is a study done on 300 older adults between 70 to 82 in a free living environment, followed over 6 years. And what they found is that a 30% reduction, again, in all-cause mortality. All-cause mortality is a big one, okay? When we look at evidence, we look at patient-oriented evidence, we look at disease-oriented evidence. Patient-oriented evidence is a lot higher on, you know, the scale of importance versus evidence-oriented evidence. And then all-cause mortality is like the highest indicator of patient-oriented evidence. So you got the highest of the high here. In the highest tertile of NEAT activity, 30% reduction in those who were in the highest tertile of NEAT activity, meaning working, just doing their job, volunteering, vacuuming, lawn care, these other things. And those who benefited the most in this age group were the ones who chose to volunteer. I mean, think about that. You're volunteering, you're helping your society, you're helping your community. It's a beautiful thing, but you're also helping yourself. Working for pay, people who are still working at that time, people who took the stairs or act as a caregiver, meaning helping somebody else. So helping somebody else ultimately helps you. Incredible, right? It's karma almost. Recent studies from the Mayo Clinic show that obese patients spend more time recumbent and sitting than do lean subjects. So I guess duh, right? I mean, we didn't need a Mayo study to tell us that, but it's good. It's there, it tells us. NEAT activity, taking walks, strolls to the park is more likely to be sustained in the long run than structured activity, exercising at the gym. So this is an important concept because, you know, I help a lot of people with weight loss. They come to me and I can answer those questions later if you guys have specifically on activity and micronutrients and weight loss as far as the differentiation and focus. But people will ask me, well, what should I do? I should go to the gym for an hour a day and I'm going to go burn calories. And what time of the day should I do it? And should I do it before meals or after meals? And so my first question is, okay, tell me what's easy. What can you do? What will you do? Not for a month from now, but I want a year from now. I want a commitment right now. And anybody could go to the gym every day and feel great for a month and then they stop because it's hard. They got life, they got work, they got their family, they pushed it really hard. And, you know, they got some benefit, but far more benefit is do something that's sustainable for you. It doesn't matter when you did it, whether you do it at night or in the morning, before meal, after meal for moderate intensity activity. Again, those, there are some differences, slight, and that's more for the endurance athletes. And, you know, I advise them differently than I would advise this, but what's sustainable? Taking a walk, 3 to 4 miles an hour. What that means is basically a walk that's faster than a stroll, but slower than a power walk. You'll notice that your heart rate goes up a little bit, but you won't be panting. You'd still be able to carry on a conversation. How about going on a walk with your spouse, with your wife or your husband, 3 times a week for 20 minutes? Oh yeah, doctor, I could do that. Yeah, okay, let's do that. And then inevitably it's like, you know, they come back in a month, man, that was harder than I thought, but you're doing it. Great. And then after about 6 months, it's part of their regimen. They're now, so I'm deprogramming and reprogramming. And now when they're doing it 3 days a week, now we go to 4 days a week, or maybe we add some resistance at that time. It has to be individualized. And we call that the Sparks technique. So it's far more beneficial for them, for the patients, to have that sustained, realistic physical activity regimen than it is for something quick fix. And we have this quick fix mentality. I mean, the internet, you want something, just go to Amazon. It shows up the next day, right? You want Deliveroo, which unfortunately I use too much of. It just shows up. But we almost, if we want the medical benefit, have to think long-term. So enhancing NEAT in one's daily life is easy. It can significantly improve weight success, but not just weight success. I showed you health success too. NEAT is additive to diet, exercise, and behavior modification. It's not meant to replace them. So the purpose of this talk is not, oh, okay, park your car far away and now you can eat your Big Macs and your Dairy Milks. No, you still have to not eat your Big Macs and Dairy Milks, but you do need to park further away. It's funny because I do this myself at NYU at the main strip in the front. There's a far away parking spot, and it's never filled except by my car. I park there I'm parked there right now, and it's like free NEAT for me. But think about that, easy to do. There's two ways to enhance NEAT in your life. So quantitatively or qualitatively. So quantitatively basically just means more, right? Quantitative is count. So doing more steps, parking further away, taking the stairs, pace while you're on the phone, avoiding moving platforms, walk when you can. The other is qualitative changes, and this involves activities of daily living resistance, and we'll get into that a little bit in a minute. So quantitative ways of improving your lifestyle activity. These are easy. Park your car far away whenever you're out. You know, I always laugh. I see people at the grocery store and at the shopping mall. They're driving around looking for that magic spot and driving. You know, they're wasting time, wasting money for the gas, and they're wasting an opportunity to engage in NEAT. So I always park far away, even though my wife yells at me for that. But it's worth it. Use the stairs instead of the elevator or escalator. You know, avoid moving platforms. Walk if you're able to. Let people who need that, maybe with their families or if they're injured, let them use that. Pace while you're on the phone. This is something I just do naturally. I think I'm naturally high energy. I'm always fidgeting. Most of my day is just on the run and walking. Do your own house cleaning, your own chores, fidgeting. Lots of studies on fidgeting. Actually, I'd encourage you to look them up and its effect on people who tend to be more naturally thin versus those who have to struggle a little bit more with their weight. These are some governmental programs in the US. I found the Stairwell to Health one interesting, and this was done at the CDC in the United States, where they actually made the stairs more inviting. So they put up for the staircases, you know, nice art and music and things like that, so that it would invite people to go that way. So we can kind of decondition, and the people who can use that would use the stairs. 10,000 step program and the like. This is the Mayo Clinic NEAT lab. It's a dedicated lab to the study of NEAT and ways to enhance NEAT activities. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with the walking workstation, which is basically you're at your desk, and it's a treadmill with a desk, so that you're working and you're walking at the same time. And for those of you who have the Very desk is that walking desk. If you don't know what it looks like, that's what it looks like right there. I'm sorry, a standing desk. So standing, I mean, this is all ideas coming out of Mayo Clinic. And, you know, it's enhancing NEAT. So you're burning more calories, you're being more healthy, and you didn't even know it. You're not exercising, it wasn't volitional. So at their NEAT lab, their conference room is actually a track. So you don't book the conference room, you book the track. So you're walking, you're talking, and you're doing it. It appears that NEAT is far more important for calorie burning than exercise in nearly everyone, and that is from Dr. Levine from the NEAT lab. All right, so let's talk about qualitative NEAT now. So this basically involves the addition of external weights during lifestyle activity. So the intensity of walking at 4 miles an hour with ankle weights and hand weights was comparable to running at 5 miles an hour. Interesting. So it significantly increased O2 uptake and calorie burn. Now, the problem with weights, how do you do that? They're clunky. You know, who wants to walk around? Wouldn't you feel weird? Like people would like stare at you and stuff. And they make noise. They're not anatomically designed. They're primarily used for kind of people who are in their exercise, you know, doing short bursts of stuff. Doesn't necessarily help us with NEAT. Unless, and this is something my group worked on, we designed an anatomically correct exogenous weight that could be utilized during activities of daily living. So something that could go on under your clothes. Nobody would know that you had it on. It was comfortable. And because it's anatomically designed, you barely even felt it. So we call this activities of daily living resistance. And it's designed specifically for NEAT, low impact activities. So for your average person. And what we found is when we did this, and I'll show you pictures in a moment, 8 hours of wear of this of these weights, we call them body togs, is equivalent to a 2-mile run as far as calorie burn goes. So these are the weights, and they're commercially available. They're called body togs. And so if you look at this lady's leg, it's the weights. I don't know if you can really see it in this picture, but they're wrapped around the gastrocnemius and soleus muscle, the anterior tibial area, which is like a spine. You know, if you feel your own leg, it can almost it's almost skin on directly on bone. You're not supposed to have weight there. The body wasn't designed for that. So when you put these on, and if you can imagine you're just wearing your regular day-to-day clothes, nobody knows you have it on. You can barely feel it. You know, people say it feels like a tight sock because it's anatomic. Then you get the added calorie burn from the forearm ones. If you see, it's sparing the olecranon, and it's sparing the ulnuts. The weights are wrapping around the flexor and extensor muscles of the arm, where the body is expecting it to be. So it doesn't feel like you're carrying weight. So this is something that you can do in your day-to-day life and enhance needs. Just go out, go to work, run errands, go shopping, do whatever you do, come home, take them off. It's equivalent to a 2-mile run as far as calorie burn goes. Now that's interesting. This is the study that we did. So the calorie burn on the right is when you're wearing those body togs. The calorie burn on the left is when you're just doing your regular NEAT activities without the body togs. So further, we did another study in partnership with the University of South Florida Department of Physical Education and Exercise Science, and we measured it against a slow walk and a fast walk. And what we found is that the individuals on a treadmill, they had increased to consumption, so increased calorie burn, but the perceived exertion, you guys are familiar with like the Borg scale, it wasn't significant. So it felt as though, so they were burning more calories without feeling that they were doing any more work. And that's pretty interesting because, you know, people don't exercise because they're lazy. Nobody wants to do something if you can get it for free. So this is, I look at this as like the bonus question for like weight loss. You're kind of getting it for free. All right, so we've gone over a lot today, and I want to open it up for questions. I really look forward to that. So just to conclude, you know, the obesity epidemic, it's a major global problem. There's no signs of improvement except for maybe the UAE, which I was surprised to see that, but that's great to see. Traditional interventions, including appropriate diet, exercise, individualized counseling, medication, sometimes surgery, are critical to the current epidemic. No doubt. I mean, at my clinic, I run a bariatric clinic in my town in the US. And I'd say I have a team. It's myself with a dietitian, with a nurse. I have a physical therapist. Less than 5% of our referrals go to surgery. So 95% is medical weight loss. But we also will use, if we need a surgeon, we use one from the University of Minnesota. But it's a multidisciplinary effort. If you want to really help people and you want to be successful at this, you got to take it seriously and you got to dedicate time and resources to it. But it is definitely doable. I mean, we have wonderful success where we are, and we have a wait list about 3 months for patients to get in. NEAT represents a creative addition, not replacement. Diet, exercise, life, those are all important. It's not this is the bonus, this is the added thing to our current armamentarium of fighting unhealthy weight in our patients. So it's something to think about. And that's why the distinction between NEAT and exercise is so important, because those are two different things. And finally, in case your patient asks you, does the handle on your recliner, the handle on your recliner does not qualify as an exercise machine. And if they ask you that and say, doctor, you're telling me to exercise and do things, I don't want to do it, then you can ask them, what fits your busy schedule better, exercising 1 hour a day or being dead 24 hours a day? So again, just finishing this off with some facetious comments, but this is serious. About 7 years ago, the World Health Organization announced for the first time in history that the number of overweight and unhealthy people in the world outnumber those who are malnourished and undernourished. So we've got 1 billion overweight and obese, and we've got 800 million with not enough food. Now that should be a wake-up call for all of us. So thank you guys for your attention. It was so nice not talking about COVID and doing one of these topics. Here's some references for you guys if you want. Here is my contact information. Happy to hear from you. So I'm happy to take any questions, Dr. Georges. You're on mute.
All right, sorry about that. I was automatically muted, but Aisha took care of me, or Alanud, I don't know which one. Anyways, thank you so much, Dr. Ayaz. This was a great presentation. Like the last time I saw you presenting, you addressed some things that we don't think on an everyday basis, and that's what I appreciated about both of your presentations. So if I may, I would like to open the floor to anybody who has any questions. I have a couple of questions, but I'll wait for later. Anybody? Ms. Aisha, do we need to give them permission to?
Hi, Dr. Georges. I think they can write their question on the chat box and you can read it.
Okay.
That would be better.
All right, good. Dr. Ayaz, can you see them and start from,
Yeah, sure. So I'm in the chat section. So I'm looking at welcome and your stuff and my stuff and thank yous, unmuting, talk, presentation, cannot activate video. Let's see, for sharing all this information, could not activate video, Nintendo. Okay, could active video games Nintendo help tackle childhood obesity? Great question. So that's called exergaming. In fact, University of South Florida, they did a lot of work on this. And so these virtual reality things, and I do believe that they are helpful. I don't think they're going to solve the problem, but I think it's helpful. Now, one of the things that we found also is that when kids are video gaming, so watching TV is actually a greater risk for childhood obesity than playing video games. And we think it's because it's or some people think it's because they're using the calorie burn from the joystick. I actually don't think it's that. I think it's because when you're using your joystick and moving, you're not grabbing for popcorn, right? You're not eating. So gaming is a little bit more active, but exergaming, where you're doing physical activity, I do think it's good. And I think I like these types of technologies and creativity because we have to think out of the box to fix this problem. So that's that.
Dr. Ayaz, the one before is asking about fidgeting.
Yeah. Okay.
Ibrahim.
Let me see if I must have passed that.
142.
What about fidgeting? Is this a different type? Is it the different types of body styles? No. So fidgeting, interesting. So this is almost like it's what I'm doing now and you can't see it. I'm shaking my leg and I do it all the time just because I can't stop doing it and I'm doing it. Fidgeting, there are people who are natural fidgeters. They move or they do these repetitive movements just when they're thinking or when they're talking. Maybe they're shaking their leg, maybe they're fidgeting with something in their hand or something like that. There is a link and an association, again, not a randomized study, but an observational study showing that people who are naturally thin tend to be more fidgeters. They're doing this movement and this fidgeting falls into NEAT, non-exercise activity thermogenesis. Because again, you're not doing it because you're trying to make yourself healthier. You're doing it just because you're doing it and you feel like doing it. So that's what fidgeting is. So it is linked to weight. We don't know exactly whether that's the cause or the reason, but it does seem to have an effect. All right. So sorry, I missed that one.
I don't see anything else for now. Oh, Adnan has a couple of questions.
Okay.
Yes, Adnan, go for it.
Dr. Ayaz, can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah, I can hear you.
First of all, thank you so much, and Dr. Georges for making this and our department. We're privileged to be sharing this topic. I always preached and read about the importance of NEAT. Me being a pro athlete and I train my clients, I always talk with them about, hey, just move around, and I emphasize the importance of this, and I'm very glad that we have someone who specializes at this. But I have some kind of questions that I wanted to ask you. It would be specific to athletes. What do you think about having an athlete who has a high NEAT and the correlation between the aerobic capacity? So do you think having a high NEAT would increase the aerobic capacity? As you know, having a higher endurance or aerobic capacity, you need to push your heart rate up, but NEAT is usually stick to just walking. So what do you think? Like, for example, an athlete who's just having a 20,000 steps in a day, for example.
Yeah, it's a great question. So now you're talking about more of the intense person. You're talking about the endurance athlete, somebody like yourself. If you're a professional athlete, it's a little bit different than the average person. So its effects are going to be a little bit different. One of the things that I think about with this, in this particular case, if you think about the athlete who is exercising and they're doing these intense workouts, what's happening to their body when they're not working out? When they're not, so in between sessions. So those are the times you would engage in NEAT, right? So what's happening is it's remodeling, right? You're getting, it's active, it's an active dynamic process, which is why you have you tend to have your proteins, your higher insulin index proteins later, because they have a higher biological value and that they can deposit and remodel better. So is there a potential effect by adding NEAT interventions during that remodeling time to actually increase capacity? Now, I have to admit that I don't know the studies that are there yet, but this is something that we're looking at in college students who are track athletes at the University of Southwestern Minnesota. So we might have some data on that later, but I don't know if it's going to have a performance effect or not, because the athlete is so high already, you know, versus your average person. But it's a great question.
Okay, my second question would be, you know, the thing about calories in versus calories out.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so let's assume there's an individual who's maybe contest prepping for a show. Like usually I work with, you know, for aesthetic purposes. He's dropping body fat or whatever. As you said, there's this misconception where people usually do cardio and like working out at the gym, and then the rest of the day they're just sitting at home. And then when you ask them, what do you eat usually at the day? Then you find them eating less, but it's because their needs are so low that they're compensating. It's just at the same level. So let's assume a person who's already dropping weight and then plateaus. Should we just keep adding more? Let's give it steps. Let's say steps. I usually say that way. So what do you think about this method? So for example, if they drop like 20 pounds in 6 months, and then after that they hit a plateau because their body BMR went down because of their body mass or whatever, and then I usually add more 3,000 or 5,000 steps in a day, so their body starts again compensating for that. So what do you think about this method, doctor?
Yes, it's a good question, and it's actually a very big question. So when you're looking at weight loss in and of itself, so if you look at weight loss, 90% of it is going to be diet and 10% of it is going to be physical activity initially. But when you look at weight loss maintenance after you've done your first weight loss cycle, then it becomes more 50-50. Food is about 50% of it, and exercise is about 50% of it. Now, you mentioned the law of thermodynamics, right? Calories in, calories out, and that is relevant to a closed, to a closed system. The body is not a closed system. The body is an open system. There are so many things going on. Leptin levels are changing. Insulin sensitivity is changing. Mitochondria are getting built up in certain tissues. I mean, so many different things. It's not as simple. Calories count, but it's not just about calories. So depending upon what your individual is trying to do, you can modify the breakdown of the macronutrients depending upon where you are. Now, specific to your question, once you've hit a plateau, what I often do with my patients, and we have our own diet, which we are using a complex, it's actually a complicated diet, both qualitative and quantitative. I won't go into it right now. But once you hit a natural plateau, exactly as you said, because you do lose a little bit of lean muscle when you lose weight, but your NEAT goes down. And then why is that, right? So think about it for a second. If you lost 20 pounds and now you're 20 pounds less, take that guy and give him a backpack with 20 pounds of weight and tell him to walk around all day. He won't be able to do it, but that's what he was doing before he lost weight. So he lost significant NEAT, right? Because he's not carrying that weight anymore. So exactly as you said, you have to build in some more exercise at that time, add more steps. And I would highly encourage like using something like Body Talks, because they're going to be getting free additional calorie burn at that time. The other thing I might say is those plateaus are also natural to some degree, because what happens, so your body secretes, your fat cells, adipocytes, secrete this hormone called leptin, okay? And leptin goes to the brain. It goes to the hypothalamus, which is kind of your appetite and weight center for the body. So after you lose weight, say you lose 20 pounds, your leptin levels go down. So then the body, the brain is saying, wait, what's going on? I want my leptin. You know, leptin is like chocolate, the brain wants it. And so if you keep going, then what happens is the brain interprets this as a starvation state and says, no, we can't have any more of this. I'm going to turn the metabolism down and turn the appetite up so I can reverse this. And that's why people lose weight and then they gain some more with interest. That's the body's trying to make sure that doesn't happen again. So what we do in our center is after we hit about that 10% weight loss, and it's different for everybody, once they get into a little bit of that leptin rebound, we focus on maintenance, and we do a maintenance cycle for about 6 months or so. If you look at the studies, it takes about a year for those leptin receptors to reset. So technically, you should wait a year before you start going more for weight loss, but nobody can wait that. If I were to tell patients to wait another year to lose an additional 20 pounds, they would all leave. So we do it in 6 months. But so there's other things going on beyond that, but I think your approach is very sound.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ayaz.
Sure.
I would leave the room for the rest. I'm gonna ask you. I mean, if I had more time, I would have a whole discussion with you. So I'm gonna give it to my colleagues. Thank you so much, Dr. Ayaz.
Sure.
Thank you, Dr.
My pleasure.
for making this.
Okay, people once some people once they don't move, they immediately sleep. Is this because of fidgeting? No. So fidgeting is actually, it is movement. So I'm not exactly sure I totally understand the question, but when you sit down and if you just naturally fidget and you make movements, again, like I'm doing right now with my leg, I just happen to do it, that's fidgeting. That shouldn't necessarily affect your sleep cycle. There are conditions that cause what we call periodic leg movement disorder, restless leg syndrome. That is a form of, I guess you could call it a form of fidgeting in sleep that keeps, but that's a pathological state that has to do with dopamine receptors in the brain, and we're not talking about that. I hope I answered that question. Can you please talk about working out under stress? So I'm not sure if this is mental stress or physical stress is what's being asked. I think it's mental stress, but I would highly encourage you to work out if you're stressed. Yes, because physical activity, in addition to what it's doing metabolically for you and your, improving cardiorespiratory fitness, etc., you're also getting a release of endorphins in the brain, and it is a natural treatment for mental health issues. I will tell you in just about I treat mental health issues. Just about, if you look at any major society recommendation, whether it's American Medical Association, American Academy of Family Physicians, American Psychiatric Association, one of the first line treatments is going to be activity, physical activity and exercise. It makes depression better. It makes anxiety better. It helps with, believe it or not, ADHD even, because who knows, maybe the glutathione levels in the brain are changed. I don't know exactly why that's the case, but it does. So I would say there's just no downside. Okay, thank you. So I think those are all the questions, Dr. Georgios. Does anybody else have anything else for me? Okay, so Mayo Clinic recommends 10. So that 1,000 steps a day program is about 4 or 5 miles. I mean, that's a good start. If you can do that, that's good. The only problem with this is that people get those Fitbits, and then they get so stuck on the number that they just start doing this in order to get their counts up, right? So there was one study which showed that didn't actually help with weight loss. And I think it's because people they're just so focused on the number. And my daughter, she's 12, she's got a Fitbit, and she's like, I gotta get my 10,000 steps. So she's doing this while she's watching TV. Let me see, just a moment. I'm proposing a new serious game called EML, Enjoy, Move, Educate, and Lose Weight. I will be happy to share it with you and discuss a possible collaboration between our department and New York University. Yeah, to just shoot it my way, send me an email, and maybe I can get you connected to the proper research department to do something together. That's nice. Okay.
Okay, my turn. Can
Yes,
you hear me?
I can hear you.
All right, good. One thing that I need to see if we have any information on is, I did notice with COVID, a lot of people go out and walk, jog, bike. Do we have any information if that's true, or if it helped, or is it just me seeing things?
Yeah, so exercise, physical activity, there's a lot of data, not specific to COVID, but other diseases, that it does stimulate and help the immune system. So what happens is people who are athletic and who are out there working and exercising, they get an upregulation of natural killer cells. Natural killer cells are part of the adaptive immune system that help fight against cancer and help fight against viruses. So there is a theoretical benefit, and they should be doing that. Yes, you should go out and exercise. You should go out and walk. It does have a positive effect on the immune system.
And then the last thing that I have, I don't know if anybody else is going to have something, but since you talked about stairs and elevators and the difficulties we're facing, I lived in Qatar for 3 years, and the university put me on the 23rd floor of a tall building. And one day I need to start walking up there on the 23rd floor. And my friends and everybody else thought I was crazy. I was losing my mind. But I gave it a try. And like you said, the first day I tried it, the stairs were filthy.
Yeah.
I had to tell the maintenance to go and clean them. But that's not the point. The point is that the first day it was tough, and I could only go 2 or 3 floors, I think. Then the first week was tougher because your body needs to adjust and everything. But after that first week, I could go up 23 floors. And I didn't take the elevator unless I had grocery and stuff like that. So I'm glad you mentioned that, because we choose, like you said, we're trained to take the elevator.
Yeah, I mean, that's incredible. And your health has benefited from it, for sure. I don't know how long you did, but the longer you did that for, it definitely probably added, you know, some life expectancy for you. That's good. Usually 23 is a lot. That's amazing.
That was, and you know, the floors here are longer than we have in the US.
Yeah. So good for you.
Right. Well, do you have any other closing statements or anything? And then I will.
I'd just like to say thank you. Thank you for organizing this, Dr. Georgios, and reaching out. It was so great. And I enjoyed the questions. I enjoyed being here, working with, talking with you, and hopefully we can collaborate on things in the future. Be nice.
I hope so too. Well, thank you so much. I cannot thank you enough. You know, I took a risk asking you because I know how busy you are, and I'm glad you responded right away. I cannot thank you enough. The college and the department cannot thank you enough. I would like to thank Adhd and Ayaz for helping us, and the Dean's office for supporting us with that. And we hope to see you again.
Inshallah. That'd be great,
Okay.
Everybody.
One more closing statement for everybody. And look at this. We said 1 to 2. Are we good or what? One more
Dr.
thing.
Georges, Dr. Abdulsalam was raising his hand. I think he has a question.
Oh, I didn't see that. Thank you.
Yeah, he's
Yes,
unmuted,
Dr.
Dr.
Abdulsalam.
Abdulsalam.
Yes, assalamu alaikum. How are you?
Hi, welcome. Salam. Good.
Thank you for this informative lecture. I just want you to kind of remind those of us who are from this part of the world who probably will jump to the conclusion and say, haha, we don't need to exercise anymore then, if that's the case. All we have to do is just fidget around and do, you know, mind things, just the little things here and there, doing our chores and all, and that would be enough. Given the lifestyle we are adopting here, mini maids that you will have in the house, any household. So I'm afraid that especially the female students that we have, they may jump to the conclusion and convey the message to their families that, look, you don't need to really exercise. All you have to do is just do these little tiny things and you will be just fine. When in reality, probably is not really totally that, you know, it's that good. But I understand where you're coming from with the argument. But I'm just afraid that they will say, well, if that's the case, then there's just no need to do all of this, even in schools. We don't have to have those PE for them if it's just a matter of asking those kids just to walk around, run around during recess and all of that. So I don't know if if you can comment on this.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for that question. I really hope nobody took that away from the presentation. And as I mentioned in the presentation, NEAT is the bonus question. It's that extra thing that's really going to take you you should exercise, you should eat healthy, you should, and you're going to get, the purpose of the presentation is to open the door and help you explore and understand the importance of lifestyle activity, which is really under-regarded. And it's part of modern society in general. But physical exercise, the other component, is important for so many other things, including endorphins, which you don't get so much from NEAT, as well as, cardiorespiratory fitness. Those things that you go after that you don't necessarily get from NEAT are going to have tons of benefits. So no, it's not a substitute, it's additive.
Thank you.
Sure.
All right. Well, thank you for noticing that, Aisha. Now, I don't see anything else. So if I may, I will let us go once again. Thank you, Dr. Ayaz. But before
Thank you.
please remember that next week on the 23rd, I just put it in the chat too, we're going to have another presentation by Dr. Vedrana on managing mental health during COVID-19 on the 23rd. So in closing, I would like to thank Dr. Ayaz, Alanud, Aisha, Dean Najwa, and the college, and everybody else who joined us. Thank you again.
Thank
Dr.
you very
Thank
much.
you so much.
Thank you.
Pleasure.